Hello and welcome. I'm Cathuris, and this series of videos is about William Afton. One of my favourite things about the Five Nights at Freddy's series is how it handles characterisation. There really aren't many other games like it, and even the direct pretenders have never really come close to replicating it. The series at this point spans over 9 games, with books and supplementary media into the double digits. In spite of this, the main characters still remain mysterious and only vaguely defined. I personally love this method of storytelling and how well it supports all kinds of speculation about the characters and the story. Perhaps quite obviously, William Afton is my favourite character. He's the grand antagonist of the Five Nights at Freddy's series, and as the encyclopedia puts it, basically it's all his fault. In this probably rather long series of videos, I'm going to delve into everything we currently know about him in as much detail as possible. We'll cover everything from the graphic novels and the short stories to William's appearance and designs throughout the games and then onwards into the upcoming movie. So, William. If I had to sum him up, I'd say that William Afton is a bad idea machine. A villain whose plans and schemes wreak havoc across the series, destroying his family and that of his business partner, and whose abject refusal to die has elevated him to the status of a horror slasher icon. We'll have a look at his atrocious plots and schemes as we go along, but I figured the best place to start is at the very beginning with the games. The first game, actually. Five Nights at Freddy's was the one that began the franchise we enjoy today. The game was another experiment in a long line of experimental games by Scott Cawthon as he sought to really make something stick long enough to take up game development as a proper career. He was testing different formulas and genres in the hope of success. As he didn't really expect it to do incredibly well, this game is perhaps the thinnest when it comes to lore. That's not to say there isn't any lore in it. Scott is a storyteller, and even at this early stage he placed Easter eggs throughout the game that hinted at something more substantial going on behind the scenes. This kind of game lore, and his methods of presenting it, are fairly commonplace now as other mascot horror games and fan games imitate it, but at the time it was very intriguing and left people hungry for more. And I'm biased, I think he still did it best. In FNAF 1, William is nameless and unseen. He's present only in the newspaper clippings pinned to the wall in one of the rare screens on camera 4B. When these clippings appeared, they presented some clues as to the events preceding the game itself. For thoroughness, let's take the time to go through each of them and see what they tell us about the killer. Kids vanish at local pizzeria, bodies not found. 2 local children were reportedly lured into a back room during the late hours of operation at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza on the night of June 26th. While video surveillance identified the man responsible and led to his capture the following morning, the children themselves were never found and are presumed dead. Police think the suspect dressed as a mascot to earn the children's trust. So the first newspaper clipping gives us 2 clear facts. The suspect is male and probably dressed up as a mascot. There's no specifying this mascot is a rabbit at this time, and we have no real reason to believe that it is. The man was also caught on camera at some point, but it sounds like they may not have captured him on camera dressed as a mascot, as the police are merely speculating that he may have dressed up. 5 children now reported missing. Suspect convicted. 5 children are now linked to the incident at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, where a man dressed as a cartoon mascot lured them into a back room. While the suspect has been charged, the bodies themselves were never found. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has been fighting an uphill battle ever since to convince families to return to the pizzeria. It's a tragedy. This next clipping appears to be from a point a little further along in time, but reiterates the information that a man was involved, and at this point they're more certain about the fact that he disguised himself, this time specifying a cartoon mascot. We know from much later games in the series that there were Freddy's cartoons on televisions throughout the time period that it was popular, so this cartoon had to have been familiar to the newspaper's audience at this time. This clipping also states the suspect was convicted and charged, but no bodies were found. Local pizzeria threatened with shutdown over sanitation. Local pizzeria, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, has been threatened again with shutdown by the health department over reports of foul odour coming from the much-loved animal mascots. Police were contacted when parents reportedly noticed what appeared to be blood and mucus around the eyes and mouths of the mascots. One parent likened them to reanimated carcasses. We lose another span of time, and the next clipping mentions the odour from the mascots and the fact the police were contacted when parents noticed the more horrific features of the animatronics. It's not made clear in this clipping if the bodies themselves were ever actually found, but this is nonetheless our first introduction to reanimated carcasses, a feature that comes back later. Local pizzeria to close by year's end. After a long struggle to stay in business after the tragedy that struck there many years ago, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has announced that it will close by year's end. Despite a year-long search for a buyer, companies seem unwilling to be associated with the company. These characters will live on. In the hearts of kids, these characters will live on. CEO. The final clipping seems to come even further along in the timeline, stating the tragedy was many years ago. It details the prolonged struggle for the pizzeria to stay in business and that it closes at year's end. We're given a line here from the CEO, but we are never introduced to who this individual is before or after this point. They continue to be a mystery to this day. So, as you can see, this is fairly sparse information, relayed to us via very short snippets of information, stretched out over an indeterminate span of time. All we really know at this point was that a man, dressed as a mascot of undefined appearance, presumably killed 5 children, in some fashion associated with the animatronics. This sequence of events implies that he was convicted and charged, but we're never certain if it was William Afton who was charged and convicted, or some other unfortunate fall guy. William's continued presence in the games therefore implies that it was not him, or he got off. Next, I want to bring up a phrase we are first introduced to at this point. It's me. Now, anyone familiar with FNAF will immediately associate this phrase with Golden Freddy in the modern day. However, I want to take you back to the point this game was created and the context we first encountered this text. It's me is found in a group of Easter egg images in the game's files that can appear randomly with varying degrees of randomness. These appear to have been added to the game at around the same stage of development. These are the above newspaper clippings, some close-up and eyeless animatronics, and the word "it's me" appearing in several iterations. Golden Freddy's close-up appears in this set. One of these image sequences is for a single camera and is 3 posters of intensely crying children which are replaced with the words "it's me" scrawled on the walls in place of the posters. Another shows "it's me" written on the sign at Foxy's Cove. Foxy and his cove become closely tied to Afton later on. I think it's very possible, and moreover, probable, that at the point he made FNAF, Golden Freddy was intended by Scott as a representation of the murderer himself, dressed in the mascot suit. Changing the direction of this at this early stage would not be a retcon, which is a term people like to throw around, but merely a different creative choice on Scott's part. Nothing was yet fleshed out, nothing was fully decided, and he simply took the story somewhere more elaborate. This game nevertheless remains, along with its implication that William did not only use the Spring Bonnie suit as many believe, but also very well might have dabbled in Fredbear too. After all, William chooses the Fredbear plushie as his representation on several occasions. In FNAF World, and FNAF 4, where he used it to torment his son. In the graphic novels, which we will of course come back to in depth, he's shown explicitly wearing the Fredbear suit as he kidnaps some of the children. FNAF 1 gave us the makings of a murderer, but what of his motivations? On night 5, Phone Guy is replaced by a garbled transmission. This sound file, when reversed and slowed, has a distorted excerpt from Autobiography of a Yogi. The line we're given is specifically in regards to a discussion between the yogi and his student regarding Bose instruments, an invention which pertains to measuring spiritual energies in inanimate objects and plants. The importance of this sound clip is ultimately a reminder that even at this critically early point in the franchise, Scott was introducing fantastical sci-fi elements of new forms of energy and their manipulation. Remnant shares a large number of similarities with this understanding of emotional and memory-linked energy that transcends biology, laid out at this very early point in the story. Scott did not pull it out of nowhere, it was always in fairly plain sight. Obviously this becomes very important to understanding William later. For now though, this is just a quick summary of the main information we're presented in FNAF 1. In Five Nights at Freddy's 2 though, everything ramps up considerably into what some would argue is the most lore-dense game of the entire franchise. So I'll see you then. Thanks for stopping by and listening to my video. If you're interested in this series, please leave a like and or a subscribe so I can see what people would like to see more of. I appreciate you guys.